Roll call. What are you looking for?
Board Member Bennett, Board Member Brogy, Board Member Foy, Board Member Long,
Present.
Board Member Morgan,
Present.
Board Member Parks,
Present.
Board Member Ramirez,
Here.
Board Member Sharkey,
Present.
Board Member Zaragoza.
Present.
Thank you very much. Let's have a pledge of allegiance. Mr. Zaragoza, could you lead us, please?
Yeah, please follow me. I pledge
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Now I need to get the minutes of our meeting, June 20th. Can I get, are there any questions on it, revisions, motion?
I'd make a motion to approve.
All right, it's been motioned and second. Can I roll call the vote?
Board Member Brogy,
Yes.
Board Member Long,
Yes.
Board Member Morgan,
Yes.
Board Member Parks,
Yes.
Board Member Ramirez,
Aye.
Board Member Sharkey,
Yes.
Board Member Zaragoza.
Yes.
Wonderful. Now that has been approved. We have our agenda. Are there any modifications, questions on the agenda? If not, can I get a motion? It's been motioned.
Second.
And second. Thank you very much. All in favor? Let's do it. All right. She stated we still need to do a roll call vote, so are you okay with?
Sorry, wasn't.
Okay, great. It has been approved. Thank you. All right, moving on to public comments. I have no public comment cards. Hearing none, we will move on to the next item of board comments. Anyone open the floor for board members?
Just one. Next meeting, we're not doing it today because it's not on the calendar, but next meeting, we'll give you a report on what occurred at the central, what do you call it? The Tri-County Air Pollution Control Board meeting we had in Santa Barbara. And it was a lot of fun, but we'll tell you about that next time.
Okay, board member Harris.
Just to state the obvious, our country's going through a lot of concern right now with the hurricanes that are affecting large portions of our country, and of course our heart goes out to them and looks forward to a long, difficult recovery. We have to support them, but also makes me want to always be conscious of what we need to do in our county and in our cities and in all our institutions like the APCD to be ready for the big one here, because I'm involved with the Southern California Association of Governments. We have an earthquake resilience initiative, and we do need to get ready because it's a question not of when but if. Yes. So I'd just always like to mention that. And there was an article in the LA Times just last week, I believe, saying that what happened in Houston is kind of a forewarning of what could happen in our county, particularly with loss of water, electrical systems, highways, our first responders getting to where they need to be. So just like to keep people conscious of it. And if anybody's interested in that initiative, please get in touch with me. I am told by our Southern California Association of Governments local rep, Joseph Briglio, that Ventura County is the most engaged. In our city of Oxnard, we have our chief of police and our fire chief involved in a lot of the discussion. So I'm very pleased about that. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? And saying none, we'll move on. All right, next is a consent agenda. Move to approve
Second.
and seconded. Thank you very much. Do we need a roll call on this, or can we all just
Can we
approve?
just push the button?
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Any opposed? All right, passes. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 11.
Hello, Chair Long, members of the board, Stan Cowan, Air Quality Engineer. This item is a request that your board approve APC participation in a Central Coast plug-in, Central Coast grant, planning grant for ZEV implementation. ZEV meaning not only electric vehicles, but the zero-emission vehicles known as fuel cell hydrogen vehicles as well. That's another plan that was recently implemented by the, I think it was directed by the Santa Barbara County APCD. There are four main tasks involved. One is to support the infrastructure development, that'd be charging stations for electric vehicle and hydrogen stations for the fuel cell vehicles. Support more EV fleets and ZEV fleets, both hydrogen cars and the electric vehicle plug-in cars. The county has several Volts now, so those are really welcome, and we like to get more fleets, both public and private. The third task is they're going to be doing individual site assessments, and we're going to evaluate those, especially those in disadvantaged communities, which is a focus of this Energy Commission grant. And then the final task is to do more outreach, like we did this past Sunday at the harbor. There was an electric vehicle car show. This grant was awarded to San Luis Obispo County APCD in the amount of about $300,000, and all the partners are getting subcontracts, which is what this is all about. Our subcontracts is worth up to $11,060. Our district has participated with the Central Coast group since 2011. In fact, we did a planning grant back in 2011 for $200,000, and that focused on electric vehicle planning. We recommend that your board approve this participation and authorize the APCO to sign the grant agreement. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Mr. Morgan?
We discussed this at our meeting in Santa Barbara about the electric vehicles and their stations and so on. Wouldn't it be more efficient if they put the hydrogen and electric near each other or next to each other or in the same place? Make it more, not efficient, but more profitable. I'll call it profitable to make sure it works and it's just not sitting there all day long with nobody using it.
Yeah, they're different fuels. One's electricity, one's hydrogen. Typically, hydrogen stations are sited at retail gasoline stations. In fact, they've cited one in the city of Thousand Oaks that's under review currently. And
Yeah.
the nice thing about electric charging stations is you can put them anywhere where you have electricity. So it's much more flexible as far as the zoning and the permitting goes.
But the one there, see, I told you guys about this last year, remember? On the what do I call it, the commission, not electric commission.
Energy Commission?
Energy Commission.
Yeah.
And I went out and sat, we talked with this, with a couple of them because they asked me to be part of it. It's been this long. Just look at one little station. It's off the road, by the way,
Yeah.
instead of being right on the freeway, to make it something to be more efficient, more used. And I just have disappointments in what I'm seeing them do.
Yeah.
And also the idea of including a station that has everything. I think you'd have more people there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And they said they were going to look at that, like that idea, but it's taken a long time.
Well, we'll put it in the plan then, make sure that they look at it for future siting.
Any other comments, discussions? All right, and seeing so, I need a motion.
I'll second it.
Motioned and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any noes? That's unanimous, as passes. Item number 12.
Vice Chair Long, members of the board, I'm Mike Villegas, Air Pollution Control Officer. Good afternoon. Our district's Information Systems Division staff has been working for a while to replace our current software, which tracks our permitting and enforcement activities. It's referred to as the Permit Enforcement Engineering Tracking System, and we call it PETS. And it was developed by staff back in the DOS environment, and it's quite dated and ready for replacement. We recently hired a fixed-term office system coordinator with experience in software design to assist us with the replacement of PETS. District staff checked with other air districts on the software packages they're using for these purposes, and we discussed with Santa Barbara and did a site visit, and it looks like there's a good chance that their software may be able to serve as a starting point for the replacement of our software. We would need to modify their software to work with our workflows, but if this works out, there could be a substantial savings in time and money in replacing Pete's. When you look at the low cost to obtain the software from Santa Barbara and the fact we would end up saving time and probably in the neighborhood of the dollar side, you know, a couple $100,000, maybe $300,000 in savings, I believe this is a avenue we need to explore. On August 17th, their board approved their chair signing and implementing the license agreement through which they would transmit the software to us. The code would be coming at no cost. However, we would reimburse their staff for the time of getting that code off their servers, minus all their data, and onto our servers, which we're estimating in the neighborhood of $5,000. I think we could really move forward here with a piece of software that's going to really help the district move forward. It's not only going to track permitting and enforcement information, but there's a lot of things that have changed over the years. When you look at the source testing required at gasoline dispensing facilities, there's just a lot of information that needs to be tracked. The other thing is if it can create PDFs, we can respond to information requests much quicker from the public. So I think this will be a major step forward. I'm recommending that your board authorize me to sign and execute the license agreement.
Mr. Morgan?
I think it's a very positive move to make. Question is, who's going to service your software when it's over? Because you usually have the people that you buy the software for, they'll come service it. Who's going to service the software if there's a problem?
Actually, the modifications will be made by district staff, and our changes, which we'll be sharing with Santa Barbara as we make changes possibly to improve it, advance the software, it'll be handled internally by us, and we'll be sharing those modifications and documentation with the Santa Barbara district.
Oh, great. Second question is,
Before you-
the software people that sell this stuff?
Before you lose that one, isn't Mike Pettit going to be helping you out in that?
Actually, there may be some assistance from the county, but for the most part, our staff is going to implement this effort.
So AQM, our Air Quality's IT department.
Yes,
Okay.
the APCD's
Okay.
information
okay.
systems.
Are we getting any kind of backlash from the people that invented this software?
Actually, they paid for a contractor to develop the software, correct? And since they purchased it, they now own the software, and the fact that we're a
Great.
sister agency, they're going to share it with
It's
us.
all positive. Good.
All right, any other
I'll just
discussions?
ask if I can. So this passes muster with our council. You've run it by council.
Well, I'm filling in for Jeff Barnes, who I
Right, I know.
understand has reviewed it thoroughly and approved it.
Correct. So,
Yes, actually, there
So the
were,
agreement has been approved by legal counsel?
yes, it was reviewed by our council and management at county council also, and the changes they requested have been incorporated into the version that.
right, I do recognize Ms. Ash is filling in for Mr. Barnes, so I didn't want to surprise you too much, but yeah, Mr. Barnes got it. He got that one. Thank you.
The question goes back to one you answered already, but just a little bit more elaboration. The staff at APCD is going to be overseeing the maintenance of the software?
Yes, and
Because,
including.
and we have that, those qualifications to be able to do that?
Yes, we have. We've made some recent very good hires, and I think we can get this
And if
software
not,
up
we
and
can
running.
always look to the county for some assistance.
We could look
if
to the
need
county,
be.
we could look to
And the county,
contractor, et
Santa
cetera.
Barbara too.
Yes.
Okay.
You know, I move to approve staff's recommendation.
Thank you. Been motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And noes? All right, unanimous vote, thank you. Next item on legislation platform, number 13.
Yes, in December of 2007, your board approved the current legislative platform for the district. Given the schedule of our board meetings and the pace at which legislation actually moves in Sacramento many times, it's very difficult for the district to take a position coming to the board on each bill. So what we've done is we've created a platform, and as long as the bill is addressed by the platform if we can support it, if it's consistent with the platform, and oppose it if it runs counter to the platform. As a mid-size air district, we generally reserve our comments to bills that would have a very significant impact on our agency. Most all of the air quality bills, and in this session, there's literally been at least 50. The California Air Pollution Control Officers Association, of which I'm a member and actually the legislative chair right now, we actually provide comments, including specific suggested language for improvements in the bills. So in those cases, the districts generally don't send individual letters unless it's, South Coast or a refinery issue such as that, where the Bay Area or someone is really germane just to their district. So in summary, when we come to your board with the bill, first, it has to have a significant impact on our agency, and second, it can't be addressed by the platform, so that those are the only bills we bring to your board. In practice, I work with the board chair to implement the platform, and a perfect example of this would be the new bill that was just introduced in the House of Representatives, H.R. 3682, which would create a voluntary recognition program for shipping lines that slow down in the Santa Barbara Channel. And when you look at the fact that our voluntary program achieved 25 tons of NOx last summer at no cost to any regulated facility in Ventura County, we need to support a bill like this. And actually, I have the letter ready for Vice Chair Long's signature today. However, I think the fact that Vice Chair Long asked to take a look at the platform and the fact we haven't looked at it in nearly a decade, I'm going to step through it and just kind of give you some background. Actually, over the weekend, I came up with a couple places I think we could clean up the language. Item 1 is just very straightforward. We're going to support legislation that improves air quality. The second one deals with toxics, and I think we should probably align the language with actually the way the California program works in Health and Safety Code, in that we'd be supporting legislation that retains air district authority to require risk reduction programs for facilities that emit toxics in a amount that would cause us significant health risk. So instead of just flat out prohibiting it, we tend to work with the facility. There's a time frame, and they get below that risk level. So of course, we'll continue to support legislation that improves innovation and provides flexibility. And certainly, if there was legislation in item 4 that would integrate the federal EPA and the CARB air toxics programs, that would be very beneficial to the air districts and all the other states. On 5, certainly we have to support both CARB and the U.S. EPA on mobile source reduction. The mobile sources account for the lion's share of the emissions left, and we still have a bit to go to reach attainment. On 6, I think we need to clarify that we're supporting legislation that retains local control over stationary source air programs, because that's really our jurisdiction. And of course, support state and federal consumer product regulations. I don't know, but you're aware, but when you use a bathroom cleaner or Windex in California, it's a low emission formula. In 8, we want to support air districts in making sure we receive adequate funding to implement these new state mandates. On 9, when this was put together, the only motor vehicle registration fees assessed and that came to air districts were from AB 2766, and I think we just need to clarify that in 9, because now there's additional monies, and we'd just be talking about the original $4 per vehicle that were earmarked for motor vehicle projects and implementation of the California Clean Air Act. There are other dollars that are earmarked for the Carl Moyer program nowadays. Certainly in 10, we're going to support limiting duplication of effort and pulling back on any unnecessary burdensome regulations on the regulated community. And certainly in 11, we would still continue to need ARB assistance in doing the air quality modeling for our federal and California Clean Air Acts. I think in 12, we could probably streamline this one a little too and just say we're basically providing funding to encourage low emission and zero emission vehicles, because it's coming down. You know, Tesla's talking about a heavy-duty truck, and Cummins just rolled out a prototype of a heavy-duty truck that you may see used at ports in the near future.
Mike, did you hear about the car from Tesla too that's gone up to 250 miles
Yeah,
per charge?
Yes.
That just came out, what, this week?
Yes. And then obviously, we would oppose legislation that would basically take our fines and penalties monies and allocate them outside of the district, because that is part of our revenue stream. And obviously, making the programs more cost-effective is a good idea. We don't want to limit the district's authority to protect public health, the existing authority. And we don't want to limit the authority to assess fees for the services we provide on a cost basis. And we don't want to take we would oppose legislation if it pulled a control measure that was in our air quality management plan out without a corresponding control measure to backfill the emission shortfall. So, and the last two were actually added in 2007. They deal with climate change, and the position of the board at that time was we would support legislation that resulted in cost-effective man-made greenhouse gas emission controls, as long as they didn't run counter to air quality or air toxics objectives. And lastly, we would support legislation that provided the district with adequate funding to implement any greenhouse gas programs. The current one we're implementing is the landfill regulation, and we anticipate coming to your board to implement the new California oil and gas greenhouse gas regulation. And I'll be happy to take any suggestions, and we'll return to your board with any language for your consideration.
Mr. Morgan.
Number 6 I thought was great because that doesn't allow them to take over local control. And number 7, the funds, making sure they provide funds for what they're going to ask us to do. It's tough on the district when you don't have the funds to do what they want. We've run into that before. And lastly, these all-electric vehicles and other vehicles, as our gas tax goes down because of lesser use of gas, then what are you going to do to take its place? Because electric is not being charged right now for anything. What are you going to do that's very important.
Yes, it is. I believe in I know they're not being charged a fuel tax, but I believe in the new California transportation bill, EVs are going to be assessed, in essence, a road fee with their registration.
To make up for the difference.
It's a $100 road fee.
$100, yeah.
And so that they're also looking at a pilot program in charging people with miles. They're looking at different things like that. So they're trying to figure out what the costs
To
are.
balance it out, that's right.
To balance.
That was discussed at VCTC.
Yes.
$100 road fee is not, what you pay in tax on your per gallon charge is a lot more than that road fee they're talking about.
Oh, I understand, and there's a lot of debates on the supervisor's way in the rural areas. So you're going to charge me more to go to the doctors than someone in the urban area? There's a lot, it's just a pilot, so you're going to charge me more, there's a whole big thing, and I don't think we all want to discuss that right now. But I can get you the link for the pilot and program, and you can read all about it and give them your suggestions as to how to modify.
Well, the other part you were talking about just now about the, what was it, mileage?
Yes.
You're going to have to set up a whole bureaucracy now to start looking at all that mileage and other things and putting it out there.
Well, there's a whole discussion about not wanting a tracker on your car, because then you know where I am, not just the fact that how much mileage.
That's another thing, too.
So there's a lot that has to be incorporated into this, so it's not an easy answer. But I think that overall, I think it's very important that we look at our legislative platform and make sure it's updated since 2007, because a lot has changed and a lot is going to change. And I want to make sure that this board has the power or the backing for our director so he can make those changes that we need on the state and the federal level.
And just like I said, the pace of legislation, I'm going to be coming to your board with a study session on AB 617, which I provided to the Basin Light Control Council. And there's significant new programs for air districts, and getting the funding is going to be very important. And it's one of those bills that, a week and a half from, it was a gut and amend, and there was a week and a half window, so.
Yes. All right, any other suggestions?
Just a comment. Looking at item number 10, it's almost contradictory, or I don't know how any agency can accomplish this, where number 10 concludes with reduces the unnecessary regulatory burden on businesses when virtually every other item on here is something that's going to impact businesses.
Exactly.
I mean, how do you walk that balance? You know, how do you achieve that? I know it's a rhetorical question. I don't expect you to have an answer to that, but it's something that concerns me, and I know that a lot of the regulations are necessary, but I don't know, it's kind of a frustrating dynamic.
Yeah, one example here is when I talked about the air toxics, the federal government tends to set up what they call a maximum available control technology regulation, and that would apply, let's say, to a dry cleaner because of the solvent they used to use. Then California develops an air toxic control measure for dry cleaners using that same solvent. And what we need to do is get those two regulations to mesh, because we end up implementing them and the poor dry cleaners trying to comply
Right.
with two slightly different rules, or can be significantly, because sometimes what they do at the federal level just doesn't mesh with how California's done it for decades, and it can be really burdensome both on the districts, the states,
Right.
and the regulated community especially.
Yeah, and that was a good example. Thank you.
All right, so you'll be bringing this back. I don't believe there's a motion that needs to be made at this time. We're not approving anything except for, we look forward to bringing this back, and if you can make sure that you give it to us in a few days advance so we
Absolutely.
can review and so forth and give you any other updates, that would be appreciative.
Yes.
All right. Moving on to receive and file correspondence agenda 14 through 15. Okay, move to receive and file. Can I get a second?
Second.
It's been first, second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any noes? It has been approved. Thank you very much. Yes, we do have standing committee, and the next meeting is,
When are you going to set it?
I forgot to look.
I'm going to have to work with you and Chair Pollock. We're not 100% sure we're going to need that October meeting now, but we
Okay.
weren't sure when we put the packet together, so.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right, we're moving on to our standing meeting then. Adjourn. Thank you.